Hi everybody, and welcome to this week's show of ROCn Recovery. My name's Carol Michelle.
And I'm Carlee.
And today we are interviewing Robert Kent. Can you tell us what your title is?
My title is General Counsel, and I work at the New York State Office of Alcoholism and Substance Abuse Services, or OASAS.
Wonderful. And today, Rob is going to be sharing with us his insights on what's going on in New York State and what the verdict in the Oklahoma case is going to bring to New York. So we'll be right back, and we'll talk to you then. Hi everybody, welcome back to ROCn Recovery. Today we're here with Robert Kent. Now Rob, we were talking earlier about what happened in Oklahoma just recently with the $572 million that in the case against Johnson & Johnson.
Right.
How is that going to affect New York?
Well, so first let's talk about Oklahoma.
Okay.
So what's happened now, and this is important, and we'll talk about why it is important for the nation, but including New York State. So now what has happened is a judge, after a trial, has rendered a verdict that an opioid maker, in this case Johnson & Johnson, created under the law what's called a nuisance, a public nuisance. And then under that law, if you create a nuisance, you're obligated to abate or fix it, correct it. So now a judge has issued a decision. Johnson & Johnson, of course, has said they have no responsibility and they're going to appeal. But he said that they are now liable for $572 million because they created a nuisance by it's not so much that they distributed or manufactured opioids, but the way they marketed them, the way they mismarketed them, the way they misled people, and then the impact of these drugs on Oklahomans. So it's a trial level decision. But the important thing, and so that your viewers know, New York is one of, I think, almost every state at this point that is suing all the opioid manufacturers, the companies that distribute the opioids throughout the country. So you can already start to see the ripples, which is Purdue Pharma, which is everyone's signal point as like the worst of the mismarketers of opioids. They make OxyContin. And they're the ones most of the books are written about, most of the articles. The interesting thing people should understand, they're a relatively small player in the opioid pill market. You know, they've made a lot of money as a family. It's a privately held company by the Sackler family. But these other, Johnson & Johnson probably makes more off of opioids than Purdue Pharma. And there are other companies that make a lot of money off of these. There's another component too, which we're not just suing the makers of the drugs, we're suing the people who distribute them throughout the country. And just so people understand, so about 80% of drugs in this, prescribed drugs in this country are distributed by 3 companies: McKesson, AmerisourceBergen, and Cardinal Health. So step back on that for a minute. So you understand these companies. Purdue Pharma makes about $2 billion a year on opioids. McKesson distributes all drugs. Their profits in the most recent years are about $200 billion. So that's where the money's at. So what's happened now, we're already starting to see it leak out. The other big piece is, so now you got a trial decision, so that a company's been found liable. There's all these local governments and states that are suing in federal court in Ohio, in Cleveland, Ohio, in federal court, Cleveland, Ohio. It's called the multi-district litigation. They brought all the parties together. Those trials are supposed to start within like the next 2 months. So now what you're seeing is these companies, now knowing a trial judge has found them liable in a state. So we're already now seeing Purdue purportedly is offering to settle this litigation, enter into a national settlement, and we don't know what they've actually formally offered, but what we're reading in the media is they've offered a settlement that would just for them that would be in the 10 to 12 billion dollar range. And it would include, as if it's accurate what's being reported, they would give up their company. They would give up Purdue Pharma and the manufacturing. They would turn it over to some like entity. So what's important now is one of these companies has been found liable by a trial, by a judge. It was actually by judge. And we think and we hope that's going to set the pressure on all of them to try to settle this. And in all honesty, it's far more preferable to try to settle this and try to settle it nationally, because what it'll do is produce money now, because Johnson & Johnson is going to appeal that decision unless they settle as part of this big national thing. That'll take years. And that'll be years we didn't have those resources, again, to abate this nuisance they created. Let's be honest and realistic about it.
So with Johnson & Johnson, the statute that they violated was the public nuisance. Now there's a lot of people that would say, why weren't they tried for murder?
That's a great question. I think, that's prosecutors in various states trying to figure it out. I will say to you, and I'm not privy to their thought process, but as a lawyer, it's easy to say somebody's criminally responsible for something. It's a heck of a lot harder to go into a courtroom and prove that. And when you start to talk, because remember, right, we're talking about taking somebody's liberty away. You're going to incarcerate them. The standard, it's beyond a reasonable doubt, versus in the civil litigation that Johnson & Johnson, you have to be more right than more wrong. 50.1 versus no doubt at all on the criminal level. And beyond that, with the criminal level, you've got to prove way more. There was malicious intent, whatever it might be. It's a much higher standard. So, and I understand the pain of the families. I meet with people all the time. I will tell you, a lot of the families I meet with, though, are involved in trying to help people. There's nothing they can do about their loved one now, right? But many of them are doing things in their community. You're doing things in your community to help people. You don't want other people to end up with that kind of loss. So I understand the anger. It's not as easy as people think it is. And I'm not trying to defend the lawyers. I'm just telling you my experience as a lawyer. We've had situations in our agency where we know people are doing things wrong. But knowing it and proving it are two really incredibly different things.
Yeah, that's so true. It was like the state suing Johnson & Johnson. Why couldn't they do I don't know if it's called a class action lawsuit, where all the individuals get together and say, listen, we want to sue you. So all the victims, maybe the parents that have lost a child or whatever. Why hasn't it been done that way, do you think?
I'm not entirely sure. I know, at least in our situation, in the state of New York, our agency, the state government, primarily funds treatment, prevention, and recovery services in the state. So we're suing effectively on behalf of the residents of the state of New York. I don't know if there's private litigation. One of my guesses is the pharmaceutical companies and the distributors are, let's just say, they're very well represented legally. And even these lawsuits that we've been involved in, they've got armies of lawyers, and it's very expensive. It's very expensive to sue and then to get a case to a point where it's ready for trial. It could be years. And I can speak from our own experience in New York, and we're sort of early in the process, but the information they're asking for, the lawyers for the drug companies, it's probably going to be millions of pages of documents. So it's not easy to do it. So I I'm sure something like that could possibly happen. I do think governments have thought we're probably in the best position, because we have lawyers that we employ, then we can go do this on behalf of the state and on behalf of the residents and ensure that the money's spent to fix this issue.
Okay, now on that note, we got to go to a break, Rob.
Sure.
Okay, but we'll be right back.
Great.
Awesome.
Oh my goodness.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to ROCn Recovery. Now, Rob, you're no stranger to the show. You've been on before.
I know. I have.
And last time we were talking about recovery high schools.
Yeah.
So I was hoping you can give us an update on how that's looking for New York.
Great. So, yeah, I think when we talked last, we went out a couple years ago to find where there were communities that were interested in trying to set up recovery high schools. And the approach we want to take in New York is, we think the smartest approach to do it and have it be done and be here in 10 years, right, and more, is through the BOCES, the regional approach, so that you draw, right, we all know BOCES run programs, they get students from their member school districts, which can be counties throughout the region they're in. So there's the volume of students, they likely can then find enough within all those school districts that this would be a valuable way for them to get their education. So we solicited, responses. We got 11 back. I think it was 2 years ago, a little bit more. This area, Monroe County, had one of the best proposals. We've been talking to them all throughout, and it's Monroe 2, I think, is like the lead. The other BOCES, though, Monroe 1 is involved. The city of Rochester can be included even though they're not part of the BOCES. And so the update is this budget that the state budget that was adopted in April, there's $1 million in the budget to give some startup funding to some of the districts that are some of the proposals that are far further down the road and ready to happen. So we've been working, the money's in our state education department, so we are partnering with them. We believe within the next few months we'll be able to get money out to at least 3 of the districts that we feel are like closer than not to making this happen. And Monroe is like at the top of our list. The BOCES provides the education. The key to these things is connection to OASAS treatment providers, but most important is connection to the recovery community in that area. And that's why we loved the Monroe proposal, because it had all those parties at the table and all together in their proposal. If your audience hasn't seen it, there's a wonderful movie called Generation Found, which is about a recovery high school in Houston, Texas. And when I watched the movie, to me, the thing about it that makes it work is not the school day stuff. That goes on everywhere. It's what's going on for the young folks before the school day starts, what's going on with them after the school day ends, what the engagement with their families, the activities on the weekends. They call it the alternate peer group, or APG is I think like the formal label of that activity, but that's like the glue. That's what makes these things work, and that's why it's so critical. If we just said BOCES here money, go create a recovery high school, and they hire a bunch of, no disrespect, clinicians with licenses and alphabet behind their name, it is not going to work. It's not going to work. You need people that these young folks can connect with while they're getting the basic education. So
Yeah, no, recovery high schools are obviously super important to me, working with youth and being a young person in recovery. And I think, the structure of the school day, like that doesn't include just the curriculum and just learning is so important, because we need to be surrounded by our peers no matter, whether we're in recovery from substance use or recovery from anything, like we need to be surrounded by peers who are going through the same thing. And one of the things I wanted to hit on was, while the recovery high schools are great, and I think that's like, that would have been amazing for me in my recovery. What happens after high school once a child graduates? How are they going to find recovery community? And I think that's where collegiate recovery comes in too, where we're bridging those gaps for young people. So can we talk a little bit about collegiate recovery programs in the state of New York?
It is something we're looking at. We've actually, most of these things we do is no magic to it. We think up a lot of stuff, but a lot of people bring us ideas, right? And we've seen, I think Rutgers in New Jersey has a really vibrant collegiate recovery. They have actually dorms where folks can, be in a safe place for them. But that's not it. It's about the activities, because as you're a young kid in college, you are exposed to everything, right? And you're in many instances away from your family for the first time, and so it's a really wonderful time and it's a scary time. So we're talking about the concept, working on some potential proposals, so stay tuned. And we're also getting outreach from folks on certain campuses around the state that are interested in doing this work. So it is absolutely something we're looking at. We're New York. If other states if New Jersey can figure it out, New York can figure it out. No disrespect to New Jersey, but a lot of it is going to drive, though, right? We can come up with, you should try to do something like this. But I would equate it to what we did with recovery high schools. We put out to the state who's interested and who can bring all the right people together, right? You think you might see something like that from us at some point. Who's interested in this state? Because we're not going to make it happen on an individual campus. It's got to be people on that campus. And we've been at meetings about these concepts, and we've heard from people from other states, but we've heard from people on campuses in New York State who are already starting to do this work. So, and let me connect the thing. So just think this through. If there's a global settlement in the opioid litigation, and it gives states millions of dollars without like all the strings we in government love to add to how we give out money, that, collegiate recovery in general is one of the areas we know we'd like to take a look at. So that's why I want to keep emphasizing, it's important. I want to hold these companies accountable, but all due respect, we're doing stuff now that needs to be done now, and we need more resources to do it now. So I'd rather resolve these issues. They'll meet their maker at some point, right? Karma's a bitch, isn't that the phrase? They will meet their maker, and let's get their money now to fix the problem they helped create. But have the latitude to do all these kinds of things, like collegiate recovery. So like just recovery housing generally. There's, all these things. We know what we want to do. We just need their money to go do it. So.
Well, let me ask you a question. You said that there's $1 million in the budget this year. Is that going to be used for like prevention too, or what is that earmarked for?
So that $1 million, is literally for the most ready recovery high school proposals. We would give them money. So like the folks in Monroe County, they've identified a space. They've got a building, but as they said to us, we actually need money to put like desks and chairs, and we need to put things in the building to make it a school. So we need some money to start that process. Because remember as well, so the beauty of the BOCES approach is, so when a student comes from one of those school districts, the BOCES sets a tuition, the cost to educate the kid in that program. And so the individual districts pay for their students to go to the BOCES. That supports the ongoing work. And just so people understand as well, because the governor did this when we started this initiative. So in New York, the BOCES part of that tuition is paid by state education aid. So the state pays part of it. Another cool piece that we got into this concept, I mentioned the city of Rochester could send students to the Recovery High School. The big school districts, the big city school districts, so like Buffalo, Rochester, New York City, there's a couple others, they are part of BOCES. And when they send kids to a BOCES program, they pay, the local district pays 100% of the tuition. Not though for recovery high schools. We got written into the law that, so for instance, if BOCES in Monroe starts up, kid from the city of Rochester School District wants to go here, the state will pay part of the tuition just like they pay for the kids who come from one of the BOCES member school districts. So that's different than how BOCES operates generally. So, and we were mindful that some of the communities where we thought it could happen, like this community, you can't tell me there aren't kids in the city of Rochester School District who wouldn't benefit from this. But if Rochester City Schools has to pay 100% of the cost, you know, they're probably going to think twice about doing it. So we tried to make it one where, you know, that it was a possibility for everybody.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's what you call thinking it through. You know what I mean? But we're going to have to go to a break.
Sure.
So everybody stay with us. We will be back.
All right.
Hi everybody, welcome back to ROCn Recovery. Today we're here with Rob Kent. We've been talking about the $572 million. We've been talking about recovery high schools. What else is going on in New York State?
So another thing we're really excited about that happened in this budget is we made a lot of changes to the insurance laws.
Okay.
And because we've made a bunch over the years, because we've known that not only were prescription opioids marketed, distributed, like crazily, and that started people on these paths. What we also knew at the same time is insurance companies made it difficult for people to access treatment. So we've been over the last 5 years doing a number of things, but there's some really critical changes that are going to take effect in January. And this is for commercial insurance, so private insurance that people might have, people through their employer or whatever. So as of January 1st, 2020, in New York State, for policies covered by New York State law, you will be able to access any OASAS treatment services, any level, without prior approval. Prior approval is eliminated. The other thing we did is we know medication-assisted treatment is critical for opioid use disorder. So starting in January, every insurance company covered by New York law has to make versions of all the different medication-assisted treatment available without prior approval, immediately available. And then one of the other key pieces that we did this budget is not only can you go to treatment without prior approval, the insurer can't start doing reviews about whether you should stay and telling you they'll stop paying for the first 28 days of treatment in any level, every OASAS level. And most importantly, they have to use our tool to make the decision about which level of care is the right place to go. It's the tool we created. The last thing we did is, starting again in January, because we've heard this frequently, I'm going to outpatient treatment, or I'm going to a methadone program or an opioid treatment program. I have to go multiple days a week at the front end, and they're charging me $40, $50, $60 a visit copay. And in some instances, they're charging me that amount to see the doctor, same amount to see the social worker or the clinician, and then another same amount to see, to do toxicology testing. It prices people out of access. So what we did in New York, starting in January, the co-payments for OASAS treatment, outpatient treatment, have to be the same as the insurer charges for a doctor's office visit. So I'd pay like $20, it would be $20. And they can't charge $320 in one day's worth of visits. It's $20 for the day. And by the way, one of the other things I'm really excited about, we not only did this work and have been doing this work for addiction, we made some changes this year for mental health. So the copay piece about making it the same as a doctor's office visit, that'll apply to Office of Mental Health outpatient services as well. And the other thing we did for mental health is for inpatient psychiatric care in an OMH facility for adolescents, there's no front-end prior approval, and there's a 14-day sort of leave us alone and let us work with this young person. So really excited about those pieces. We're way ahead of every other state in terms of trying to make access immediately available. Great.
And we're going to have to go. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time on ROCn Recovery.